stoked to have you in, Brian. I know we've communicated over the years. Years ago, you helped me out post a knee surgery with trying to get things back together for staying in shape, and it was a huge help. And so, as I'm starting to work more now on just general performance enhancement for my life,
Yep.
as an athlete, I was able to push it in one sport for a really long time, and now I'm kind of looking more at the GPP version of it so that it all benefits me kicking more ass across the board better.
Mm.
So,
Isn't it interesting how we all kind of end up there?
well, I've always looked at it like this, man.
Specialization's great, and you did well in a very obscure, different sport. Like,
For for as long as it would let me.
yeah, but that's something to you lived in a very specialized place for a while until it didn't work,
And
which is great.
that pursuit's never supposed to be long term.
No, can't.
Like, that fire's too hot for too short of a time to be able to hold on.
Not on a different experience.
Uh, man, the first thing I'd ever really, between us having some mutual friends with Kelly Starrett and some other folks, when I got your first book, or not, maybe not first book, but Unplugged, I was really interested in that because about that time I had started using some different wearables and things, and I guess I've always used them as they're a game,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't use them to base a whole bunch of my training. But you're seeing people just building their life into trying to beat this thing.
Mm. Oof. You're touching deep to start. So, just what's interesting about tech is the amount of money that I've spent on it to start. So make no bones about it. And I mentioned this in the book with Andy, and there's a reason why Andy and I get along so well. Um, as a researcher and a scientist, he has to use data. He has to use information so that the public actually can understand what's valid and what isn't. The problem with that is that the greatest data processing machine that's ever existed is inside of you and I.
Right, right.
And so for some reason, we've bought in to the idea, and this was long ago, like there's actual information in the 50s and 60s on technology, never actually making life or anything we were doing easier. It's only allowed us to tack on more shit to do or to think about. There's a study done on women in the 50s, I believe. It was the 40s or 50s, whenever washing machines and washer and dryers were they had become manufactured. They interviewed them and asked them if their lives had become easier, and across the boards the response was no. It's only up the scale of how much more clean things need to be.
Interesting.
So meaning they had to make more shit clean, right, around the house, because they've got something that can actually help them. And this isn't anything towards women. It was a study done with
Sure.
women, because at the time that was the time, right? So in looking back at that, and in my own experiences with technology, I like, look, it provides me data for information to validate what I actually already understood, what was going on. But the more I get connected to that information or that data, the further I draw myself away from myself. I start having to think more without the emotion attached to it, which is intellectualism, which is where we've veered a hard, left or right, whatever you want to call it, a while ago with education. And it's a big problem, because education is where the problem began, with a disconnection to our actual intelligence. Our intelligence involves our emotional capacity, and our inability to connect ourselves with intuitive response to things is the real thing.
So are
And
you
so,
seeing people just override like how they personally feel to just follow Whoop training or whatever?
not just people, I do. Like, you did.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
You did, bro. Like, that's what you did to your knee. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I definitely overrode.
that's what Kelly did to his knee. Like, that's what I've done to my hip. That's what I've done to other things with my body. we've all done, and it's not a like, oh, we're all bad. It's no, what are we listening to? What are we paying attention to? And there's a time and a place for this stuff. And it's simply just a time and a place, but make no mistake. If we stay with it, we will remain disconnected. We will miss the intelligent process of what it's actually like to be a connected human being and understand our environment, because we become a part of the environment.
So, are you still using the tech and being able to
I
now?
have to with what I do, because my main job is to actually figure shit out, right? Like that's what I do. I just go explore, and I like stumble into things, and then I go back down the mountain and find another route up, and then I go down the mountain and then find another route up. And I have to actually go, okay, this was a change with me. What was that change? And then I've got to actually talk to people who are much more intellectually intelligent than I am, like Andy Galpin's, like, people like, I don't know if anybody would know who Lisa Regan is, but these are biochemists, endocrinologists, people who are actually studying very deep level stuff. The Dan Fafs of the world, from a coaching standpoint, who are a matrix of information because of experience through time.
Dan's one of the OGs that's been around
Dude,
forever.
it's insane. I've talked to him ad nauseum, and it's just like, I don't even understand how this guy's compiled this much information about human beings.
No,
But
it's insane.
it is, and you have to explore those things to understand, like, those people, to validate, am I right here? But I'm questioning why I'm right, because there's still a piece of me that's a bit disconnected, because I'm getting caught up in the information. You think a deer, you think a lion, you think any animal, a killer whale, questions its intuitive ability?
No, but you don't think the ability to question our intuitive ability is part of the gift? Is that we're not always just operating on that level and we can kind of make decisions?
I think it's a catch-22.
I do too. I believe it can be
Yes.
overshot.
Yes.
Which,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
we've proven.
Yeah.
No, that's so. With your top end athletes that you work with, how do you manage their use of tech?
I bring them back to what they actually feel. I teach them what a practice actually is again.
Okay,
That's
so
all I'm trying to do.
this thing is here to record data, not to predict where we're going.
Yeah, it really comes down, because a professional athlete is a very different beast, unless you're talking about, a very obscure sport, like alpinism or big wave surfing, of which I've been heavily immersed in. Not alpinism, but have big wave surfing in the waterman culture. They're not so focused on numbers. When you've got athletes like football, soccer players, baseball players, etc., or fighters, there are actual numbers they're trying to hit and make sense of everything, right, all the time. And that can dilute the actual experience. It doesn't mean they don't need it. The coaches need that information to understand where the trajectory of things are going, right? But you have to be able to get somebody back to why they're actually doing it in the first place, right? And that's what a process is about. And so, my actual work has gone almost sideways, man, to where I was all about the performance and the numbers. And now I'm literally about just reconnecting people to themselves, and just like, hey, how can this enhance or get you back in what you're doing and loving what you're doing? So the outcomes, although they matter, they're just a learning experience, right?
For sure. And so since you're now, leaning more back into connecting to that intuitive feeling, is that really what's triggered more work into breath work, into that where you're really starting to operate the system?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, and that I was fortunate that began so, a decade ago now. But it didn't start there, right? Like, it was really about performance in the beginning. And it was great that it was. I mean, I had spent 10 or 12 years growing up with, Kelly, right? Like, we were living in a bubble, in a world that, like, I'm not trying to make us better or anything than anybody, but it was like we were in a bubble, thinking in ways that we didn't know anybody else was thinking. We were just painting in a way that nobody else was painting. And we were right there with each other, kind of pushing each other to understand things. And there were a number of people like the Greg Glassmans and, you know, like many people like Dan Thafts came into our lives, the guys from Altus, like, you know, so many people came into our lives and allowed us to understand things in a way that, you know, when I came at Breathwork, I was very fortunate, like, to be where I was at, because I actually looked at it from the physiology standpoint. I got so hook lined in on the physiology versus the woo-woo factor of things. And that was why I stayed away from it in the beginning, because I had practiced yoga many years ago and I just didn't give a fuck about the breathing aspect of it. I just wanted to get flexible, right? Like, because I was doing other shit, you know?
No,
So,
I find all that interesting, man. The breathwork stuff, especially as an athlete who was into performance for so long, it's something I definitely overlooked. And now that I'm utilizing it, because I could feel the same thing as you, the pushback to a bit of woo woo. Little did I know during my my professional tenure how woo woo I'd go with my life shortly thereafter. But here we are. And so being able to use those techniques for performance enhancement, I mean, not just, you know, the woo woo side of stuff to me is about anxiety, is about digging in, or even the people that mean like you can release DMT through the body by doing, you know, holotropic breath work or a number of various.
Well, we should talk about that.
I'm into it. I've been a big fan of DMT. I don't care how it gets in me.
Well, we can come back to that, but like, you know, so yeah, there's a reason why the woo woo kept you away. So don't, like, you know, there was a reason right? Like, so now I get it, and I understand when somebody's talking in a way about it that's this, you know, kind of woo woo way. Like, I understand why they, like, what happened. Like, they got hooked in and it's great, and this thing changed their life. Careful, because it's only a tool, because there's no amount of breath work you can do that's going to erase or change the pain you're not willing to go through. So, and that's coming from somebody who's been in it as deep and as dark as it gets. Like, you know, and breathing couldn't do shit for me until I actually was willing to make some changes that needed to be made in order to actually do those things. Breathing is simply a tool that helps us regulate our nervous system and how we're using energy. That cannot change my thinking. If I decide to be a dickhead or beat myself up, like, I'm just gonna be some woo-woo dickhead,
Right.
like,
right.
Who just is cynical, right? Like, great. You know, but, you know, and then, you know, I mean, going to the DMT thing, it's like, that's one of the caveats of the thinking that's going on right now is like, yes, there's DMT in the human body, but it's such an insignificant amount that there's actually no way right now that we've been able to prove or show in anything, including near-death experiences, that DMT is a factor in the hallucination process. I actually just did a monster post on this.
Really?
Yeah. So psychedelic breathing, and this will make sense to you in a second, right? Now you're going to understand the physiology of it. Is so when we hyperventilate, and that's what these, you know, these practices are attached to, especially holotropic. What we're doing is we're putting ourselves into mild to extreme respiratory alkalosis. This shift removes carbon dioxide from the system and makes oxygen sticky to the hemoglobin. So we can't biologically really use as much oxygen. So the trillions of oxygen molecules that are inside of a red blood cell, or billions that are inside a red blood cell, cannot really be released at that moment. So you'll see large quantities of oxygen, which, because of this, there's a partial change in carbon dioxide in the blood, and there's massive amounts of oxygen, which make us more alkaline, which creates the alkaline process, which then kicks the kidneys into high gear, releasing bicarbonate into the system. So we're creating this system of responses to where we're retarding how oxygen gets used. In most of these situations, you'll stop breathing for a while because CO2, the main mechanism for breathing, has been literally removed. So people believe they can hold their breath for a super long time. And although they are holding for a longer than average time, what they're doing is they've now sped up the means for oxygen falling out and the hemoglobin becoming highly reactive and becoming biologically used. So we drop oxygen levels at an accelerated rate. So if you've ever done Wim Hof and put a pulse ox on and you've seen your O2 levels drop, and you're like, oh my God, that's lower than the medical community says I should be. I'm clinically dead at this point,
No.
right? Like I've seen it at 36 before, right?
Wow.
Which isn't exactly like the best thing to do, but it's such a short period of time that it comes back up. But when we do this, when we go through these stages, I've interviewed enough people who've drowned or done a near-death experience, of which no research has shown the DMT has been an effect in these things. But in drowning and in these near-death experiences, the same response that you'll get with people who do these deep transcendental psychedelic breathing things, some of these same effects are occurring to where they're tricking the body into thinking that it's dying. And so the body sets up. So if you get too low of oxygen, and you can go look at free divers when they do this online, when they miss a dive and they shallow water blackout, you will get critically low and you'll start to go lights out and you'll get woozy as that happens. Anybody in MMA knows this as well. If they get choked out, they don't tap in time because you're just cutting off the blood supply. The brain's got wonderful, wonderful ways of doing this, of setting us up for death. And one of them is that critically low oxygen mechanism that it just goes, okay, you're going to get woozy and you're going to go lights out. And that is exactly what happens when people are doing these types of breath work. It's happened to me several times. Like
Yeah, my very first experience with doing Wim Hof was with Kelly and Juliet. It happened to be at their house, and because they're lunatics, we're doing the breath work, and then we're doing underwater carries on the exhale because, well, you know Kelly. So
yes,
same reason I've ridden an assault bike in a sauna. I don't. Do I think it's terribly valuable? I don't. Do I think it's kind of fun and hard? Yes. And so we've done a couple rounds, and after the third round, Kelly was like, "Hey, when you make it back up to the surface, like if you're not needing air, chill." And I did, and then like at some point when I went to stand up, I just straight back into the water and
oxygen.
Yep, total trip to the pink room there for a second. Then
there you go, bro.
and I was like, "All right."
Yep.
Full dream.
I mean, I've gone lights out. I've seen people bust lips, knock teeth out, like the whole 9 yards. I mean, it's just lights out, dude. And that's why it's really important not to do in water, because you actually speed you speed up how fast oxygen will drop versus a real breath hold where you're not hyperventilating or superventilating carbon dioxide off. And you've trained the system to be able to use a lot of that CO2 versus hitting the panic switch with it. And that's why carbon dioxide tolerance is such an important process with a lot of things, including like cold. It's all really connected in how we are managing stress and dealing with stress. And it just so happens that CO2 is that metabolic stress messenger that we kind of missed and you just kept calling this waste product. It's an invaluable molecule that makes it so that oxygen, that energy works in like this yin yang faction, right? So think of oxygen as the white and the yin, and the black is carbon dioxide. You need
we need both.
You need both. You can't, and the moment you start removing it, the oxygen starts stacking in and it's not usable. And there's been a lot of fallacies, like a lot of hyperbole that's kind of traveled around the spheres of the breath world with breath work and thinking that you're oxygenating yourself and doing these, and that couldn't be
just not true.
False. It's highly not true. It's physiologically not true. There's just no possibility of it. And these are just based on principles and facts that we understand. And I didn't make that up.
Sure.
I mean, it's just, this is why it was important for me to go the path that I went, was to really understand things from the physiological side and then dovetail into the neurobiological stuff. And then really connecting that with the mechanics and movement side that I had already had.
No, I think it's great, and what a big piece it is. I mean, because of systems that we need to compete and perform and do stuff, breath is pretty critical. Being able to get oxygen into the system, being able to get CO2 out, be able to turn over and continue feeding muscles, right?
Correct.
I'm really excited to now know that the, I guess, DMT aspect of the breath work is just not found in any type of.
It's just not true until proven otherwise. And the fact that it goes around like you've just caught on to something that, because of the woo-woo world you've ended up.
And it's also just totally a complete
cool.
ignorance, because I've done breath work and I've, let's say, mildly tripped.
I thought
like,
the same
this
thing
explains that. Yeah.
And went deep into it and was like, oh, there's actually no information. There's nothing that proves that DMT is an effect in near-death experiences or anything that's happening here. And they
now my experience with the breath work, like I guess kind of feeling that came with it, while I enjoyed, I wouldn't call it similar to actually taking DMT.
Nor would I.
No, that's a very different.
DMT, and I've psilocybin, MDMA,
right.
ayahuasca. Like I've journeyed into these places, and it was not the same experience. But I would say that I've had a more profound or deeper experience through the breathing than I have with any of those mediums.
See, and that's what I find really fascinating, is that it isn't the DMT release, yet people are still finding this really heavy work. I mean,
oh yeah.
I mean, you guys were working a long time doing breath work. I know you guys had teamed up with Wim at one point, doing that and mixed with ice and working with Laird, and now you're running Shift. What is Shift? And I guess, how are you guys working with athletes?
So what we're doing is really kind of bringing a more consciousness to training, like what I've talked about, developing a practice. And so we offer up a myriad of different things for people to actually experience or play with, but we've added at the foundation breath control with that. So getting a real basic understanding of how breath control works within the aspects of any sort of training, or even as a standalone, how you move with it or how you use it before, during, and after these things. So we're really bringing people to more of a healing place from a very holistic, I'd say from the most extreme holistic place you can, without going into the psychedelics world, without going into the holotropic or psychedelic breathwork stuff. It's not that we're staying away from that stuff. It's just we're staying in a lane.
No, you're just different focus.
Totally.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we're not playing in these areas. But we're really offering people. Where we're headed is more of from the experiential side with people to show them how they actually manage stress in varying situations, and showing them the deeper level side of that, to where that emotional side is actually more of an inherited process that they don't realize they've been making decisions based on, and they're not as authentic as they could be. And so giving them a portal, a guidance into how to authentically experience something without that emotional attachment.
Yeah, man, I really, really like that. And the idea that you guys are setting that up with athletes, I think is a big deal, because I mean, there's such different connections to things. I mean, whether that's panic and the emotion that comes with it, or high stress and the emotions that come with it, and then people shut down and then don't function well and don't perform well. I mean, we've seen tons of athletes that perform great in training and can't manage the anxiety of actually competing.
Yes.
And so, I mean, is that using the breath work to help them kind of separate from the physical body that they're in and be able to control the situation? Is that kind of the main thing of it?
Yeah. I mean, look, if I can get somebody to engage in some sort of breath control, regardless of the patterning, if they will be engaged with that, we've now removed the outside chatter. So that's why breath work is really at the foundation of all major meditative practices, right? You
Present.
know, when I worked, so I worked at San Quentin for like 6 months, and I talked to my guys there that really went. I mean, they went headfirst into this program that I had developed.
And are
I
you
just
you're
brought
talking to San Quentin as far as like prison?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was still living up north, in NorCal, I engaged in a program at San Quentin. I asked to start a program there. I had some connections to kind of get in and do that, and went in, and I asked these. I told these guys, many of them doing life sentences, like, hey, look, there are groups of people that have decided to like just give up everything, move to the mountains of Asia, isolate themselves with very few people, eat once or twice a day, and they engage in a breath and meditative practice, and they find enlightenment. You may not have chosen really to be here, although you may have. You may not want to be here, but how you decide to be here is really no different than them. And it is your choice on how you want to do that.
So
And
essentially teaching these guys meditation to be able to manage being in prison.
bro, yeah, I mean, it was really, I went this backdoor route with it, and I inevitably had, I mean, I had a guy who was in for manslaughter who, killed a guy in a fight, and he came up to me, and he's like, look, I've been fighting my whole life. You came in here and you said this could change our lives in a way that we would never imagine if we just went all in. He goes, you were right. He goes, the other day I had a guy who started a fight with me that I could have beat the shit. I could have just tarred this guy.
Yeah.
And I literally just started breathing, and it made me smile, and I walked away for the first time in my life.
Yo,
And
what
that
a cool
that was
tool.
like one of the biggest. I was like, there you go. Like, and I let him know, I'm like, this is all you. This is your decision. This is your process. I simply brought you to a place to guide you to understand that you have what you actually have control over versus what you don't have control over. And so if you take the time to understand that, and that's where breath work can bring you in, because for a lot of us who deal with more anxiety and this ramped up, like, just energy, right? Breathing can really calm that down right away.
Yeah, it's been super valuable. Even just doing box breathing or simple apnea training, just
Yeah.
being able to use something to be present. The way I always describe it to people, it's if you're breathing in a, I guess, non-autonomous way, and you're counting and holding and doing those things, it's really tough to think about anything else.
Correct.
And that's what a simple practice that is. And especially once you can start breathing and really feeling things open up, and crazy that
Yep.
you'll get sore from doing it.
Uh-huh.
And then also really weird to breathe really hard for a couple minutes and feel like you can't continue to do it, but like you're not dying, you're laying on the ground. Like, of course this is a muscle that you're not flexing, that you're not getting better at.
And that's why Wim Hof's had such an impact on people, is he was able to bring something to the people who are these type A's, myself included, crazies of the world. And it's like, we're going to hyperventilate and we're going to hold our breath. And all of a sudden, blam, just literally get this backflip of, you get this rebound effect of the sympathetic into the parasympathetic nervous system that drops you out and calms you down instantaneously. And you're like, oh my God, I'm present.
Yeah, what an interesting tool for lunatics.
Yes. Yeah.
As we are, and Wim sure shit is.
Yes.
So the breathwork stuff that you're talking about in prison, working with meditation and stuff like that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Damien Eccles. Damien Eccles, I got turned on to, but he was talking about meditation while he was in prison to kind of help deal with his being there and being able to just feel like he could go anywhere in the world at any time because of his ability to center and find that. Now, I know he's dealing with more of the ceremonial magic, if you will, but meditation nonetheless.
Yeah.
Damien Eccles' story is really wild. He's one of the kids from the West Memphis Three. I don't know if you're familiar with that story, but there are 3 kids who got locked up like in West Memphis, Arkansas during like the satanic panic of the 80s. And they life sentenced these kids with no evidence for a murder, just because they listened to metal music and dressed weird. And Damien Eccles, why he was in jail serving this life sentence before they got the sentence overturned and released. He had dove into a bunch of breathwork meditation and getting into tons of different practices, and then ended up on ceremonial magic and was able
Got
to
it.
talk about how that shifted a lot of stuff for him. And so I just think that's rad that you guys went and worked with the prisoners on some very, very simple techniques that you can completely own. Like, you don't need anyone else to help you with breathing, and you can do it anywhere.
Yeah,
Other than in the ocean, I suppose.
pretty much, man. Pretty much. I mean, it's in essence the inevitability of any real process or practice anyway. Like, it really just becomes you and that practice. And that's what breathwork's really designed to do, is to bring you into yourself so that you can just be. And like, where fear and love or anger and sadness, that is an environmental thing, right? It's not a
No,
psychological thing,
right.
right?
It's a
Like,
reaction.
seeing the rattlesnake is a fear. Like, you are fear. Be fear right now. Like, but also understand, be love, right? Like, it's all, we're so conditional with things because we overthink it. We override things, and we're like, oh, no, I'm trying to predict something that hasn't occurred yet, or I need to get this. And it's like, oh, versus what's in front of me right now.
Yeah, that's I run into the fault of expectation over just maintaining the intention of where I'm trying to go.
Yep.
Now you mentioned, with athletes that you're doing breath work as a before, a during, and then a post. Is it a different cycle that you run as far as a breathing technique for during, post, and pre
Oh, yeah.
competition?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Fascinating. And so so can you run me through that a little bit? Just, what you're accomplishing by doing the breath work within the athlete.
So there's a lot of things that can um, play a factor, right? I think the most important aspect of my work, of our work, has been that what we've seen is there is no one individual path. There is no one individual protocol that's going to work. I've seen people whose lives have changed as a result of Wim Hof. I've also seen people whose lives have probably ended because Wim Hof, right? Not Wim Hof himself, but just going and deciding to be in water and holding their breath and, not realizing
What they're doing.
things, or having cardiac problems and doing something that really you shouldn't be doing. If you've got heart disease or something going on, you shouldn't be hyperventilating. There's just physiological rules that exist, right?
Sure.
Nonetheless, um, some athletes are anxious prior to training. Like, they're thinking of numbers, they're thinking of things. So it's really getting them regulated prior to training. Other athletes are not, and really want to boost before training. So you could do things. So you're either doing things to regulate or to stimulate. From a stimulation standpoint, largely what we're trying to do is in some aspects of training, is to get more red blood cells in the system. And that can actually happen very quickly, but people don't realize there's a short-term acute response to breath hold work, if done properly, that will increase red blood cell count, which, if I increase red blood cell count, I've just increased CO2 tolerance, I've just increased oxygen carrying capacity.
Yep.
So I've got a twofold process, right? So now I feel like I've got more of an engine, and I actually do legitimately have a bit more of an engine at that point. That stuff's saved for more of your like a priority, or even like fight night. Like, so I'll do this with fighters a lot, or right before a big match, right, or a big lift, or something that's going to happen, right? Where you're going to want something like that.
Yep.
But also just to regulate, that becomes a very important process. But we don't want to regulate so much that we're falling off of a cliff, right? So we just don't know we have to understand how they respond. There's two variables within the response cycle that we figured out. The physiological side is carbon dioxide tolerance. Everybody varies inside that range. So how well we actually tolerate carbon dioxide is not only dependent on our individual fingerprint, but where we're at psychologically and metabolically. So if I've trained or I've worked out or I've been more stressed that day, I've suppressed that CO2 tolerance. If I am an anxious person, I tend to have a lower threshold. So I have a higher sensitivity to CO2. That means I breathe a little bit, a respiration rate that's a little higher than normal, right? So there's part one. Then there's the psychological side where it's just an assessment. It's not a test. It's like, how do I respond to things? I've thrown out the word type A, or type A's, type B's, type C's. You've got varying psychological factors that happen, how people compartmentalize things, how they don't, how they react to things, all starts to play into these factors, and how I'll screen somebody and set them up for doing things. This doesn't mean that the world can't go out and do that. We've put out enough information for people to explore this, but they also can come to me to actually have them set up in this process. We're working on some things right now that are actually going to make this a little bit easier for everybody from an algorithm standpoint. But nonetheless, it does come down to an intuitive thing and what you feel, and actually removing the variables of time. Because time is really just a construct, and putting people in the moment is the actual thing.
Right.
Because if I've got you right here, right now, you don't need to worry about what's coming up. You're already prepared for that. You've been preparing for that. That's what you've prepared most of your career for. So you're going to do what you're supposed to do there. Let's get you focused right now and see what we can create to make the system operate in a way that allows energy to move effectively.
Which, of course, translates over to performance at work, performance at a speaking thing, performance in life.
Yep. Which is why the work that I was doing went from like athletes to like executives to stand-up comedians to speakers. I mean, it's just a weird world at this point.
Well, there's people that have to perform, right? Like that's
100%.
something now that my tenure as an athlete, I would say, is over, or at least a competitive one. And that's the thing I'm still really turned on by, that I have a skill of, is that I can perform whenever I say to fucking perform. And being able to master that across the board as an athlete.
Dude,
and then
Tiger Woods is going to fucking perform as long as he's got everything in that moment, right? Like Michael Jordan's going to do that in that moment. You know, I mean, I don't know if you've seen that movie. Kelly and I were just messaging about this when he's in Russia on,
right.
Yeah. Have you seen The Alpinist?
Wait, I think he sent that to me and I watched it.
Marc-Andre Leclerc.
Fuck, now I don't.
The mountain climber, the solo mountain climber, not Alex Honnold.
No, not Alex Honnold. I guess I'm not familiar, but go ahead.
He's probably the most mutant human being we will ever see. I mean, he makes Alex Honnold, of which this is not true, look like a sellout.
Yeah, Alex Honnold, what an interesting mutant too,
dude. Oh no, Alex is a mutant. Like, he's a freak
for sure. But this guy's just,
this kid is the other. Like, you're like, oh, like that's what exists.
But what is he doing that's so outside of the range of normal?
He's soloing alpine climbing, meaning he is climbing things that nobody's ever climbed, and in places like ice climbing, rock climbing, all in the same. I mean, we're talking things that are triple the length of like El Capitan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, and look, Mark died, but that was the only way this was going.
Well, look, I feel that way. I think it's crazy that anyone who talks to someone like Alex Honnold about climbing and feels weird about it, like, yo, Alex is okay with the fact that he's gonna fall off a wall and die. That's how this goes.
Yeah. This kid, like, you realize, I mean, for those of us that have really kind of gone in this direction or done the work, you're like, I mean, yeah, it sucks that he died, but the fact of the matter is this kid lived a life fully.
Well, not only that, he did it completely uncompromised.
Like it'll literally just open. You'll just be like, oh wow!
I will probably watch that this evening. I'm pretty
it's worth everybody's watching.
You know, other lunatics like that. Something you brought up earlier, Brian, is you've worked with big wave surfers, and I know that you worked with Laird, and popularity of the show that's been on HBO now, the 100-Foot Wave, with Greg has fired up and interested me just because I like lunatics. And so I've added Nazare as a travel location. At some point in my
Good
life,
for you.
I need to see Earth do that.
Yeah,
Because
it's an interesting thing, man.
have
You
you
know,
been have
like
you been
look,
out to
Nazaré
Nazare or
its own thing. I'd love to see it too. You know, it that is a very interesting culture. It's a very, very interesting
big
culture.
wave guys?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, because in one sense they're very calm and connected. Then there's this short period of disconnection when they see like a purple or black dot on a weather
Oh man.
thing, and then all of a sudden the mind starts going, what it oh, I gotta get here, I gotta go there, like I've got to travel to Nazare and I'm in Hawaii. Like I don't know if people can comprehend getting to Portugal from Hawaii and doing it within a 48-hour stretch, but that's why these guys need sponsors and have to have all these things, because they've got to be able to book a ticket and get their shit on a flight and go somewhere to do something that is just like, I mean, it's really hard to comprehend what upwards of 50 feet looks like in the water.
Right. Right. I don't have any frame of reference. Like I think
Yeah, I
the
mean,
biggest
had
water I've
I
ever
not,
been in is 8 or 10,
yeah,
and
no,
it's
yeah,
gnarly.
yeah, which is big, dude.
Which is,
That's
yeah,
not
is
small.
I wasn't trying
Let's
to
be
hang out.
clear. Yeah, yeah. I mean, had I not struck up a very good relationship with Laird, and been able to help him with a number of things, and him help me. I mean, he brought that to me. I mean, he brought me into that world and showed me things that, I mean, like a lot of human beings are never going to be able to see this like from that angle and from that perspective, and to see somebody who is that connected to the environment. Like he is just a literal part of the environment when it's on time. When it
It's
is,
so interesting to watch those guys, man, because
yeah.
none of my sports, while there was an environmental part of the sport, ground conditions, weather, rain, blah 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 blah, I
Mhm.
didn't need Mother Nature to 100% cooperate for me to do the thing I've been practicing. Because like you don't get to peak that way. What an interesting thing. It's like, all right, so next week we go as big as possible. Like, how do you train around that? Do you just stay ready?
Yeah, year
Okay.
round, year round. It,
God.
it, it, it's a life, but that's like this whole, like the whole thing why I harped on the alpinists. It's like these guys, that's year round.
Yeah, it's not a hobby.
It's not a hobby. That's who they are.
Right.
And that's, I think, what life is about. It's supposed to be lived. It's not supposed to be, I need to do everything. It's really not. And that's the problem we've fallen into. And that goes back to what you brought up in the very beginning, is tech has done nothing more than added on more shit for us to do while we just get overloaded with information. And so learning how to filter that and understand that, I think Kelly is one of the people who's done one of the most incredible jobs with that. I mean, he's able, I very early on, he was able to set his phone down, detach, dissociate from the technological side of things. And yet when he's on it, he can be on it and he
Yeah.
can engage. And it's just, he's so we were we were making fun of each other, and he was like, bro, we're both in coping strategies, just so we're clear. Like, yeah, I think that's what we all are doing, though, to be clear. And when we try and tack on more stuff that we need to do, it's just this thing that we're not participating in something wholly. And that's the missing point. And that's the whole point of kind of where my work has gone, is to help people really develop a practice into something, whatever it is that is. I don't care.
Right.
The unique thing about it is that I've slipped into this medium that's allowed me to insert it into whatever it is you're doing, whether you're a stand-up comic or you're a big wave surfer or you're John Jones.
Yeah. So whatever it is, let's pick a direction and let me help you.
But yeah, is
Yeah.
this what you want to be doing? Are you sure? Let's really investigate that. If it's not, let's figure out what it is. I'm not here to tell you what it is, because I'm not you.
No, and it's man, that's exactly it, man. How many people reach out that want help to find their passion, and like that's such a like I can't scratch that itch for you, but if you can show me a direction you'd like to go, I can help.
Yeah, well, and that's the process by which I've actually been able to really strip down is I'm able to take people through this surface level shit and then get into the, like I can just strip them through this process of surface level stuff. It takes, a number of weeks, but then it's like we get into the deeper layered stuff and they're already ready for looking at the emotional side of things and going, "Oh, now I know why I'm like my parents.
Yep.
I'm a mirror. Like
Yep.
I've been literally in a survival mode my entire life, and it's like, oh, I don't need to be them. And there's nothing wrong with them.
Nope.
That's their experience. And I just mirrored that for survival as a kid, and it's like, you don't have to go back through the damage of your past. It's just understanding where we're making decisions right now based on that past. And it really opens up the door for people to go, holy shit.
Yeah,
Like,
I think
oh,
it's
I
just
really
such
don't
another
want to be doing
valuable tool for awareness.
it. Dude,
That first
it.
moment. And so many people, it's interesting when people see that light bulb click on
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, I mean, I've been lucky enough to see it happen in a few people with psilocybin trips.
Yeah.
One of which I laugh about with psilocybin is the autopilot system doesn't seem to run well with psilocybin in it. And so, if you're someone that will click into a story habitually or do any of this or tell an anecdote or any of that, like you better be paying attention to telling that story because you can't just zone out and let that thing run like you normally do because you know the speech. And it's almost like the first time you get to take a step back from looking at your CPU operating system and be like,
Yeah.
why does it do that?
More often than not, the human ego is running things that it
Yes,
shouldn't
it
be.
is. Yes,
And,
it is.
I am, trust me, this is a daily process that I work through every single day that I had to strip down in a way that I had like I thought I had some shit figured out and it was like, nope, there's nada. And it's a daily thing that it's just like, oh, there it is. There it is. There it is.
Yeah,
Who
same
are you?
boat.
Who do you want to be?
That's it. Same boat across the board. And now you where was I? Okay, so I was very curious. Like, there's got to be people that are, if you're talking about these monks and stuff like that, and let's say
Yeah.
Wim Hof or yourself, let's call this breath work mastery,
Yeah.
or further down that line to wherever there's not really a there, but
Yeah.
further down.
Yeah.
What are the big differences that you guys are incorporating and using that you see even normal people in their everyday breathing technique not do?
Yeah. So I mean, we started with it and I didn't get into the rest of it, but it was like, so we've got a pre, then you've got your intra.
Hmm.
We've developed a gear system. So think of breathing as gears. So the speeds at which they occur. Think of the transition from nose to mouth as your higher gears. So your more explosive anaerobic activities that inevitably will require you to open that trap, right? Um, so the gears go from like 1 to 5. So there's an intention with understanding how much energy we're going to use and the type of energy we're going to use and knowing the limiters on that without having to use technology to do that. We've seen it. I mean, across the boards, I've seen how these things work, and I've done it with PhDs, and they're just like, "What the fuck just happened?" I mean, we're at the UFCPI, and we had the head exercise physiologist, and we were running Cowboy Cerrone through some protocols, and we let him go for 5 minutes on his own, and I was like, "Go around at what it's like to feel like, and you breathe however you want." And he's like, "Okay." And he did it. And, Cowboy is definitely like what you would expect, chip on his shoulder. And he's like, okay, give me your funny little breathing pattern.
Exactly right. Tell me,
Like,
wizard.
okay, do this breath protocol and just follow it for the 5 minutes as best you can, as close to these numbers as you can. And he did it. And everybody was just like, what just and you just saw his RER separate, and he became more and more aerobic as we went through the 5 minutes, where when he was in it, he was anaerobic on his. way of
So
doing
is
it.
this like in a round of sparring that you're talking about?
We had him on an assault bike. We
Okay,
just asked him to mimic
got it.
as best he could the intensity at which the fight would play at. And so the same intensity, we used the same wattage, and he actually increased the wattage on the breath control with us, with our side of things for 5 minutes. And we saw him far more aerobic than he was doing it his way.
Now, over time, can you start to build that breath pattern into more
The
of?
whole idea, and you asked about mastery, is this: you don't have to use any sort of breath control. You'll fall into exactly where you're supposed to.
So with enough repetitions, time, just
Enough
like anything
repetitions,
else.
you're going to default into this natural pattern. And this is where you will see indigenous cultures when we look back through historical context, especially with, there's well documented information in the 1860s by a guy by the name of George Catlin of indigenous culture in North and South America, and a lot of that being primarily nasal breathing.
Yeah,
Because
I got hooked on that a few years back and was using some of the tape, and it changed a ton. And I can pretty much stick with nasal now until it's, until
yeah,
once you get in the
the
reds.
exercise stuff will change the whole thing because it's the intensity variables. Now you're actually asking the diaphragm to work in a way that it's never really worked. So you want to talk about, like, people have got resistance, like we screwed around with training mask and all that stuff. And then I was like, wait, why do I continue to default to my nose when I'm using this thing? And then I took the thing off and it was like, oh, because that is the resistance breathing device, because this is the process by which I'm supposed to follow to be in more long-term energy cycles. Short term, I can open my mouth, but long termer, like the more fit I get, the more I'm going to be nasal breathing. And for a guy who's got a deviated septum, that just started to increase and increase and increase over time. And after like about 4 years of that stuff, I mean, I was operating on a bike at 96% of max heart rate, preferably nose only.
Wow.
Preferably, meaning if I flip to mouth breathing at that same intensity, I burnt out quicker because the energies change that happened.
Okay. Yeah, I was always just trying to figure out how to not keep snotting all over myself.
Well, you just got
Just get used to it.
it's primarily water because of the humidification, but you're just going to have to get over that process.
Oh well.
Nonetheless, that has an impact on what happens when we return to homeostasis, meaning my respiration rate's now changed, the way I breathe's now changed, because now I've strengthened my diaphragm, the intercostals, a lot of the accessory muscles that are involved in breathing have now strengthened in a way to where I'm actually in a much more mechanically proficient place. And I will, it ends, especially for big guys like you and Kelly, it's like it changes the dynamic of things very quickly for sleep and regular life.
Yes. Yeah, the sleep one being a big one. I was lucky even when I was big. I never really suffered from much apnea. I would just snore the heavier I got.
Yeah, and that's probably just a jaw, a mouth, just, and I
Too much
snore too,
meat.
my mouth shut. Yeah, well, I mean, I still snore with my mouth shut, but it's because I was not breastfed long enough. I had braces. Like, I went through the same disastrous ideas that we've played with, but nonetheless we did. Now these things are starting to change, and we're starting to look at things a little differently finally, from this more holistic standpoint, and
And,
so
and that's really interesting, man, with the mouth first nasal breathing. Like, and you were talking about the indigenous cultures. I mean, we've seen tons of stuff as far as just even viral or disease and stuff like that that gets um, mitigated better just through nasal breathing over mouth breathing.
this is designed for cleaning the air. No other filter system we've ever designed has even come close to it. None.
I
We
don't know. Have
cannot.
you seen these masks we have going on,
We
Brian? Very,
cannot
very good.
redesign. We don't know how. We can't figure out how to redesign the turbinate cilia hair system. Like, you've got as many hair follicles in the nose as you do on your head.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole intricate thing, and the mucus is part of a attack your immune system response that launches viral and bacterial thing, like assaults that can last up to 10 years. Like, that same virus comes back in 10 years, boom. It's like it's got a handle on it already.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real shock that we haven't gone into any of this over the last 2 years, major publicly, with things that could help people.
Well, I mean, look, we've put, to be fair, and I've sat with you. I sit with you. I'm not in disagreement, but
Right.
unfortunately, we as a culture, and we've all participated here, have put way too much on the shoulders of medicine, and
I
thus
agree with
push
that.
medicine to solve problems that it's never been. It will never solve, like cancer.
Right.
Medicine can't solve cancer. It's
Yeah.
not a it's not a problem. It's more of a metabolic issue than anything, and we need to look inside at
What
that.
we're
And
actually doing.
yeah, and I mean, if you look at the work of Gabor Mate, who's starting to really get this stuff into the limelight, who is a MD, and saying now the connection to all major disease is emotional intelligence. It's an emotional process. I mean, how many people ask themselves, or like, how many people know who Lou Gehrig is, right? And they know about Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. Well, how many people go as far to say, well, who was Lou Gehrig actually? Oh, he was a baseball player, but what did he do? Well, he was known for being in the most amount of games,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Other than
Like,
doing Cal Ripken, he was the
yeah,
guy.
right. Well, and Lou Gehrig was before Cal Ripken,
Right.
right? Well, when they did the autopsy on Lou Gehrig, what they found was a guy who had had multiple broken bones in his hands and all over his body. It was trashed, meaning you had a guy who would never take himself out of the game, even when he was hurt, and would just push himself. And so he pushed himself so far by suppressing so much that he inevitably shut down his nervous system in a way that a degenerative motor neuron disease took place.
Wow. Not that, I mean, not necessarily saying that people who end up with ALS caused it themselves, but in this instance,
Not to suggest that people are causing this themselves, but
it is a response to something.
it is response to how we are handling or suppressing emotional activity. It just so turns out that suppression of emotions, whether it be anger, love, hate, it doesn't matter. If we're suppressing, that's internally causing a lot of the distress that we can't really grab a hold of.
Yeah, and no shock with as emotionally tumultuous as things have continued to grow,
Yeah.
that we're going to see more stress on people.
There's no, it is no, like, it's no wonder mental disorder is now in a heightened state.
Of course it is, right?
We've done
Like,
nothing, absolutely nothing to prepare for this. We've isolated ourselves more. We've we've bought in hook, line, sinker to other people and other things helping us or saving us. It's just it's a very, very sad kind of state of affairs, and people have decided that, and I've this is where I've really worked really hard, is to not divide myself, not to think that I sit in a camp, is to really look at, I mean, living in NorCal and thinking the way I do is it was very counter to
I bet.
culture, but I wanted to understand. So I needed to understand something. So I immersed myself in trying to understand, and I do get it. And I understand the other side of things too. It's fear.
Mhm.
It's psychological fear. And it's so much fear that you're willing to put other people in charge of your own health.
Which is amazing to me, which is not something
Yeah.
I'm ever like. I'm not interested in giving the keys over to any part of my life to anyone
Yeah.
else. Like, much less wait for some fucking bureaucrat to help me out.
Well, I'm willing to die on a mountain.
I would also happily do the same. I don't plan. I'll be real shocked if old age is what gets me, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Some reason I don't think that's how I'll punch my ticket.
Nor I.
No, and I'm very comfortable with that idea. I don't plan on turning this machine back in with a lot of resale value.
Yeah. I don't think it was designed that way.
No way, man.
But
What a
somehow
cool
we're
thing they do.
ourselves that that's how we're supposed to slide in home.
Oh man. Yeah. And we've been convinced of that safety, and this is dangerous, and don't do it. And I see it from a lot of fronts, whether it's litigious sides of things, that we are a sue happy culture. The lawyers have convinced us of that side of things, and fucking why contracts are as difficult to understand as they are. Through, there's a ton of fear response to everything, especially anyone trying to mitigate
Yeah.
media now.
Yeah. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with fear. It's just the fear that's going on is not real fear.
Right. Right. Real fear is
So,
great.
so just to be clear, what that really means is somebody's listening to this right now. Right in this moment, are you in any real danger? No. There you go.
Right. Right. You're able to listen to this. No one's listening to a podcast while in danger.
Correct.
Right. So, as we kind of wrap things up, man, like for those at home who are stuck in this, who are stuck in their sympathetic nervous,
Mhm.
how do we have something as a giveaway just to help them get out of it, kind of become present and catch some breath work?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest thing is we've got um, a free, we've got a whole way to start a breath practice on our site that begins with that process of understanding CO2 tolerance. So there's an exhale test, something that we learned very early on from the freediving community, how to set tables. Well, I started to learn how to set rhythms for specific breathing patterns with this so that it wasn't too difficult for people. And it goes from very basic to more advanced apneas, right? So it starts from a basic cadence or rhythm standpoint where it's an equal in out. Then it starts to go into, in, hold, out, in, hold, in, like a box breathing pattern. Then you start to focus more on the length of the holds, etc. So this all works in conjunction with your CO2 tolerance. The lower it is, the more prone you are probably to anxiousness, to reactiveness, which starts you off a little bit easier to just get a baseline. And here's the thing with breath work that people don't really realize is that it shouldn't be too difficult to start. Like legitimately, free divers that do CO2 tables are only holding their breath for 50%, really only 50% of what they could hold for. That is helping them develop higher CO2 tolerance.
Well, that's an interesting idea as far as training goes, right? I'm not a runner, and I did a Bryce Canyon trail run in May and trained.
Uh-huh.
So it was the first thing I've ever run and trained for on this shitty fake knee, and was great. And my only intention of it was to be better at running than I was when I started, which is essentially not good at all. And really enjoyed the process of getting better at it. But of course, like if I knew that going into that, right, that I needed to be able, my cutoff time for the 20 miles I did was 7 hours. And so I essentially knew that that's what I give a shit about. I need to be able to move forward for 7 hours at the minimum of this whole thing. And so during my training, I never needed to do a 7 hour training session. I knew that if I can get to 3.5, I'm gold. Because I can tell you how I feel at 3.5. If I can get to 3.5 and I know that I've got gas tank, and I would imagine that's similar to the breath work for these divers, right? Like it's kind of like zone 2 training for breath.
Pretty much. Very rarely are they hitting, only when they're really going and like, it's not very rarely. Like they are going and hitting maximals. They are going and hitting sub maximals. But for a lot of the time with breath work, what people don't realize is they just get into a smooth rhythm of 5 to 10 minutes of following a pattern that matches up with how well they tolerate carbon dioxide for that day or for that. Like, here's the thing. If you go look at training, it's like if I asked you to hold your breath before you went and trained, right after you're done training, do you think you're going to be able to hold your breath that long?
Gotcha.
No. So why would you actually try? Like your day goes like that based on your psychology, based on your metabolic output, and both respond to each other, right? So it's a systems thing. It's not a disconnect. There is no disconnection. There is no psychology and physiology. They're one thing,
Right.
right? So it's all influenced in the same way. So just understanding where you're at and how something should feel is really the baseline. And that's where how to start a breath practice is on the website. You can get it off the link off my Instagram or off of shiftadapt.com. Just go to what we do and starting a breath practice. really will get people into it. And then we've got a membership that incorporates all this stuff into everything if they're interested, which is like $30 a month. So, I mean, it's well worth learning the process of all this stuff, at least for a few months, for people to actually get a foothold into how we're using it, not only in a movement standpoint, but a strength and conditioning environment, or even just a, you know, running. If I want to go run, like, how do I apply this so that I can help myself if I'm doing a marathon? Because 3.5 hours or 3 hours is the same energy system as 7, just so we're clear.
Yeah, if anyone can do a 3.5 hour marathon, I'm not one of those.
Yeah.
Really quickly, and I guess just kind of a last takeaway for people, Brian, like, what are things that you can manipulate through breath work, like physiologically?
So a lot of the biochemical process. So your chemistry is affected first and foremost, right? So your blood chemistry, your pH is what is regulated through breath. From that standpoint, how I manipulate my breathing has an impact from a biochemical standpoint into the endocrine system. So we get a neuroendocrine response, we can get an endocrine response from all of these things, depending on how we're playing with them, right? Like, so dopamine, serotonin, you know, adrenaline, norepinephrine, all of these things have very potent plays in what we do. So creating motivation, creating drive, getting myself up, bringing myself down. So calming myself down, I'm opening up the vasculature, I'm constricting the vasculature, right? All of this stuff is malleable through breathing. There's a saying that BKS Iyengar, the guy responsible for bringing yoga to the West.
Okay.
So he's famous for saying, the mind is the king of the senses, but the breath is the king of the mind. And so that in and of itself, breathing is really the remote control, which is something Casper van der Meulen came up with, is breathing is the remote control to the nervous system. So,
yeah, like, as you were saying that's what I was saying. I was like, so this is the way just to access the controls.
You got it.
Yeah, fascinating.
You're playing with how we use energy. It's how we use energy. So from a biochemical standpoint, if my energy is off, I can learn to manipulate that energy, slow things down, or speed it up very quickly.
Dude, I love it.
Yeah.
Brian, I can't think it enough, man. Where can everyone find all your stuff?
shiftadapt.com, or just, I post one post and on Instagram and then remove it every single time
and run away as fast as possible.
Yeah, there's one on psychedelic breathing right now that will disappear in a few days, but
all right.
Yeah, anyway,
brother,
all there
thank you so much, dude.
Appreciate you, man.
We'll actually cross paths in person. I'm sure I'll have you back on again, because I'm dabbling more in cold water plunging as well, and I know that you've got a wealth of knowledge there as well.
I've played in that medium for quite some time.
Yeah, I love it. Between breathwork and cold water, using that, I always, when I'm not doing enough of it and I switch back to it, I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? This is such an easy thing to add in every day that makes such a difference in how I feel, my drive, and like focus. And so,
yep.
Brian, thank you again, and I will send you all this as it's coming time for the show.
Right on, brother.
Thanks, you guys, for listening, and we'll see you next week.